The courthouse hallway smelled like industrial cleaner and broken dreams. Emma sat rigid on the wooden bench, her small frame swallowed by the oversized space. Her legs dangled 6 inches above the cold tile floor, her pink sneakers, the ones her father had bought last Christmas, swinging in a rhythmic, anxious pattern. She clutched her stuffed rabbit, Mr. Hoppers, so tightly that the synthetic fur had begun to tear at the seams. At 8 years old, Emma had already experienced more heartbreak than most adults encounter in a lifetime. The hallway buzzed with activity around her. Lawyers hurried past in expensive suits, their leather briefcases clicking against the marble floors. Clerks pushed metal carts stacked with legal documents. Parents argued with their ex-spouses near water fountains. Children cried. Adults raised their voices. It was a symphony of human destruction, and Emma sat in the center of it all, trying to become invisible. 18 months ago, her world had shattered. She remembered the exact moment, her father coming home at 2 a.m., her mother screaming, the sound of dishes breaking in the kitchen. She'd covered her ears with her pillow, but the noise penetrated everything. The fighting didn't stop that night. It continued for weeks, then months, escalating from verbal attacks to legal warfare. Lawyers became regular fixtures in her home. Court dates appeared on the calendar. And with each confrontation, Emma had withdrawn further into herself. Her father sat approximately 20 feet away on a different bench, his leg bouncing with nervous energy. He wore his serious lawyer suit, the dark navy one that made him look like a stranger. He kept checking his phone, occasionally glancing at Emma with an expression she couldn't quite read. Was it frustration? Guilt? Anger? She'd stopped trying to interpret her parents' emotions months ago. Nothing made sense anymore. The man she'd known her entire life, the one who taught her to ride a bicycle and made pancakes on Sunday mornings, had transformed into someone harsh and cold. He barely looked at her anymore without seeming distracted or irritated by her presence. Her mother occupied the opposite bench, creating physical distance that mirrored the emotional chasm now separating them. She wore a navy blazer identical in color to Emma's father's suit, as if they'd coordinated their appearance for battle. Her mother's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her purse. She kept stealing glances at Emma, but whenever their eyes met, she'd quickly look away. Emma had learned to recognize this pattern. Her mother was crying internally, the kind of tears that never reached the surface but pooled in the eyes anyway. Just yesterday, Emma had heard her mother on the phone with Grandma, voice breaking. "She won't even hug me goodbye. My own daughter won't hug me." Emma felt guilty about that. She loved her mother, truly she did. But affection required energy she simply didn't possess anymore. Everything took enormous effort, speaking, moving, pretending to be normal. Her second-grade teacher, Mrs., had called her grandmother 2 weeks ago. "Emma's so quiet," she'd said gently. "She doesn't participate in group activities. She sits alone during lunch. Is everything okay at home?" Everything wasn't okay. Everything was catastrophically, irreparably wrong. The custody battle had consumed their lives. Emma's father wanted primary custody. Her mother demanded it with equal intensity. Both claimed to have Emma's best interests at heart, yet their actions told a different story. They used Emma as ammunition, forcing her to take sides, pressuring her to express preferences she didn't actually have. "Who do you love more?" her father had asked one evening, his voice deceptively casual. "Your mother," Emma had frozen, recognizing the trap. There was no correct answer. Any response would be betrayal. Her therapist doctor, a kind woman with gentle eyes, had explained that Emma was experiencing selective mutism, a psychological condition where anxiety rendered speech impossible. "It's her mind's way of protecting itself," doctor had told her grandmother, not realizing Emma could hear from the waiting room. "She's overwhelmed. Her nervous system is in constant fight-or-flight mode." Emma had looked up fight-or-flight on her grandmother's computer. It described animals preparing for danger, their bodies flooding with stress hormones. That made sense. Emma's body constantly felt dangerous, her heart racing unpredictably, her stomach in permanent knots, her throat closing whenever she tried to speak. School had become increasingly difficult. In September, she'd been a normal third grader, talkative, enthusiastic, eager to share stories about her weekend. Now she sat silently through classes, watching other children laugh and play as if they occupied a different universe. During reading time, Mrs. had called on her to read aloud. Emma's mouth had opened, but nothing emerged. The other children stared. Mrs. looked uncomfortable. "It's okay, sweetheart," she'd whispered. "You can pass." Emma had passed every day since. Her best friend had stopped inviting her to birthday parties and sleepovers. "You don't seem like you want to have fun anymore," had said matter-of-factly during lunch. Emma couldn't argue. Fun felt like an impossible concept, reserved for children whose parents still lived together, whose homes didn't feel like war zones. The hallway clock showed 9:47 a.m. The custody hearing would begin in 13 minutes. Emma's fate would be decided by a stranger in a black robe, a judge who'd never met her, never seen her laugh, never understood the depth of her fear. The judge would read legal documents and listen to arguments and make a decision about where she'd primarily live. Emma had no say in it, despite being the person most affected by the outcome. She didn't want to choose between her parents. She didn't want this nightmare to continue. She didn't want to sit in this hallway anymore, surrounded by the wreckage of other families' destroyed relationships. She wanted to go back in time, back to when her father still read her bedtime stories, when her mother braided her hair without sighing heavily, when her biggest worry was whether she'd finished her homework. Emma's grandmother emerged from the restroom, her weathered face creased with concern. At 68 years old, she'd become Emma's anchor during this storm. She'd picked her up from school, sat with her through therapy sessions, held her when nightmares woke her at 3 a.m. Grandma knew that Emma was drowning, even if nobody else seemed to notice. Sat beside Emma, placing a warm hand on her granddaughter's small back. "It will be okay," she whispered, though her eyes betrayed doubt. "I promise we'll figure this out." Emma leaned against her grandmother, still clutching Mr. Hoppers. She wanted to believe those words. She wanted to believe anything could fix this broken mess. But as the courthouse doors loomed ahead and the reality of the hearing crystallized, Emma knew one truth with certainty: nothing would ever be okay again. Her childhood was over, and she was utterly, completely alone with the weight of it all. Sat in the cramped office of Dr., a psychologist specializing in child trauma, her weathered hands folded anxiously in her lap. 3 weeks had passed since the custody hearing concluded with a temporary arrangement. Emma would spend alternate weeks with each parent while awaiting the judge's final decision. But the temporary solution had done nothing to ease Emma's suffering. If anything, the constant transitions between homes had worsened her condition. "She's getting worse, not better," explained, her voice trembling with desperation. "She barely eats. She has nightmares every single night. Last Tuesday, I found her hiding in the closet, just sitting in the dark, not crying, not doing anything, just existing." Doctor listened intently, taking notes. She'd worked with hundreds of traumatized children, but she understood that traditional therapy had limitations with selective mutism cases. Emma couldn't talk to her, which meant the conventional therapeutic process was nearly impossible. The girl's anxiety was so severe that her nervous system simply shut down communication as a protective mechanism. "I want to try something different," Doctor said thoughtfully, removing her glasses and rubbing her tired eyes. "Have you ever heard of animal-assisted therapy?" Shook her head. She'd explored every avenue, medication, different therapists, parenting classes she'd attended with both of Emma's parents to encourage cooperation. Nothing had created meaningful progress. Her granddaughter remained a shadow of herself, existing rather than living. Animals, particularly dogs trained specifically for emotional support, can bypass traditional psychological barriers, Doctor explained. They don't judge. They don't demand verbal communication. They offer unconditional acceptance. For children experiencing trauma and anxiety, this can be profoundly healing. The animal becomes a bridge to emotional expression. Felt a spark of hope ignite in her chest, a feeling she'd thought extinguished weeks ago. Do you know where we could find something like that? 2 days later, pulled her Civic into the parking lot of Paws for Healing, a nonprofit organization dedicated to animal therapy. The facility occupied a converted farmhouse surrounded by green lawns and flowering gardens. Wind chimes hung from the porch, creating soft, melodic sounds. Immediately felt the space's intentional peacefulness. Everything about it screamed sanctuary. A woman in her 50s with kind eyes and graying hair greeted them warmly. Her name was, and she'd founded Paws for Healing after her own daughter struggled with PTSD following a car accident. She listened carefully as described Emma's situation, nodding with understanding that came from personal experience rather than clinical detachment. "We have a dog who might be perfect for Emma," said. "His name is Max, and he's a 4-year-old golden retriever. He was originally trained as a service animal, but he has an intuitive gift for connecting with traumatized children. Let me introduce you." Followed through the facility, her heart accelerating with cautious optimism. They entered a sunny room filled with comfortable furniture and soft rugs. Playing in the corner, seemingly without a care in the world, was Max. He was beautiful, golden coat gleaming like honey in the afternoon light, warm brown eyes that seemed to contain infinite patience and wisdom. But what struck most profoundly was his gentleness. This wasn't an ordinary dog. His movements were deliberate, his demeanor calm and centered. He seemed to understand the weight of emotional suffering with almost spiritual clarity. "This is Max," said softly. "He was trained by our facility over 2 years. He's completed all certification protocols for emotional support work, but more importantly, he genuinely loves helping children. Watch." Invited to sit on the couch, Max immediately approached, resting his head on her knee without being prompted. He didn't jump or lick or demand attention. He simply offered presence, steady, reliable, unconditional. Felt tears spring to her eyes. This dog understood something fundamental about comfort. 3 days later, Emma arrived at Paws for Healing with deep reluctance. She'd learned to be suspicious of changes and special activities. Every new thing seemed to involve adults trying to fix her, which only made her feel more broken. She wore her favorite sweater, the purple one with the small hole near the hem that her mother had offered to fix but never had, and kept her eyes downcast as guided her inside. "Emma, I want you to meet someone," said gently. "This is Max. He'd really like to spend some time with you if that's okay." Emma's eyes remained fixed on the floor. She didn't respond, didn't nod, didn't acknowledge that had spoken. This was her pattern now, complete non-engagement with unfamiliar people and situations. Didn't push. She simply guided Emma to a comfortable chair and left the room. For 5 minutes, nothing happened. Emma sat rigidly, staring at nothing. Max lay on the rug approximately 8 feet away, also seemingly uninterested in engaging. Then slowly Max began moving, not toward Emma aggressively but with deliberate patience, closing the distance inch by inch. He didn't make eye contact. He didn't attempt to jump or touch her. He simply positioned himself beside her chair and lay down, his body parallel to hers, his head resting on the floor. His breathing was deep and rhythmic. For the first time in weeks, Emma felt something shift inside her rigid body. This dog wasn't demanding anything, wasn't asking questions she couldn't answer, wasn't disappointed by her silence. Max was simply present, accepting. Emma slowly reached out her trembling hand and placed it on Max's warm, golden fur. The sensation was electrifying. Soft, warm, alive. Max's tail wagged gently, not the enthusiastic tail wagging of ordinary dogs, but a slow, measured acknowledgement of connection. Emma began to cry. Not the silent, repressed tears she'd shed in the courthouse, but real tears, deep, wrenching sobs that came from somewhere primal. She buried her face in Max's fur, and he remained completely still, his body an anchor during her emotional storm. For 45 minutes, Emma cried while Max stayed beside her, occasionally turning his head slightly to rest his chin against her leg, a gesture that somehow communicated understanding. Over the following weeks, Emma became a regular at Pause for Healing. Twice weekly sessions transformed into 3 times weekly. The therapist, a gentle woman named Dr. Lisa, gradually introduced structured activities while maintaining Max's calming presence. "Max, can you sit?" Dr. Lisa would ask, and Emma would watch as the dog responded obediently. Somehow, witnessing Max's responsiveness made Emma feel less powerless. If Max could follow instructions, perhaps she could too. During their 4th session, something miraculous occurred. Emma whispered her first words in weeks. "Good boy, Max." Her voice was barely audible, cracking from disuse, but the words had emerged. Max turned and looked directly at her, his brown eyes filled with what could only be described as pride. From that moment forward, Emma began opening up, not through traditional conversation but through the safe portal that Max provided. She'd whisper her fears to him. "Daddy doesn't want me anymore. I made Mommy sad. I'm scared of choosing." Max would listen, never judging, never offering commentary. He simply absorbed her pain with the wisdom of an old soul trapped in a canine body. Her therapist documented the changes: decreased anxiety symptoms, improved sleep patterns, reduction in selective mutism episodes. But the clinical notes couldn't capture the transformation fully. Emma was healing not through talk therapy or medication, but through the unconditional, non-judgmental love of an animal who asked nothing except to be present. Watched her granddaughter change week by week. The ghost child was being replaced by glimpses of the real Emma, moments where she'd smile, where she'd laugh at Max's antics, where she'd express an opinion without apologizing first. "You were right, Grandma," Emma whispered one afternoon, her hand buried in Max's fur. "Max helps, he understands." Squeezed her granddaughter gently, tears of gratitude streaming down her face. She didn't know what the judge would decide about custody, but she knew that Max had given Emma something far more valuable than any legal arrangement: hope that healing was possible. And sometimes, hope was everything. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning, official court seal embossed on heavy cream-colored paper. Hands trembled as she opened it, her eyes scanning the formal language. Final custody hearing scheduled, December 15, 2024. All parties required to attend. Child testimony mandatory. Mandatory. That single word sent ice through veins. Emma had made significant progress over the past 8 weeks. Her sessions with Max had gradually coaxed her out of her protective silence. She'd begun speaking in short sentences, her anxiety noticeably decreased. But a courtroom, lawyers, aggressive questioning under oath, that was an entirely different magnitude of challenge. Immediately contacted Dr. Emma's therapist, scheduling an emergency consultation. They sat in Doctor's office, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the walls. "The judge is requesting Emma's testimony to determine her preferences and emotional stability," Doctor explained, her voice heavy with concern. "The problem is clear. Courtroom environments are inherently anxiety-inducing. For a child with Emma's documented trauma history and selective mutism, testifying could be devastating. We risk triggering a complete psychological regression." "Isn't there another way?" pleaded. "Could she write her responses? Could she testify via video?" Doctor shook her head. Both parents' attorneys have already objected to those alternatives. They want authentic testimony, which in legal terms means in person, in the courtroom under cross-examination. They believe a child who won't speak is a child who can't be trusted to tell the truth. Felt fury ignite within her. The system was designed to protect children, yet it was asking this traumatized girl to perform under the worst possible circumstances. "There has to be something we can do." Doctor leaned back thoughtfully, her fingers steepled together. "There might be one option, though it's unconventional. Emotional support animals aren't typically permitted in courtrooms. However, given Emma's documented medical condition, we could petition the judge for an exception. If we present a comprehensive case, Her diagnosis, therapy records, Max's training certifications, expert testimony about animal-assisted therapy. We might convince the judge to allow Max to accompany her during testimony. Hope flickered. Would that actually help? Potentially, yes, doctor said carefully. Max's presence wouldn't eliminate her anxiety, but it would provide a grounding mechanism. The animal's mere presence can reduce cortisol levels and activate the parasympathetic nervous system. Essentially, it calms her body's threat response. It won't be a magic solution, but it could provide the stability she needs to speak. Over the following week, and doctor assembled documentation meticulously. Medical records spanning 18 months documented Emma's selective mutism, anxiety disorder, and trauma response. Psychiatric evaluations detailed her condition's severity. Therapy notes charted her breakthrough moments with Max. From Pause for Healing provided Max's complete training certification, detailing his specialized protocols for supporting children with emotional disabilities. Doctor prepared a formal statement explaining the clinical benefits of animal-assisted therapy in courtroom settings. Emma, meanwhile, remained largely unaware of the bigger picture, explained gently that the judge would like to hear directly from her and that Max would be there to help. Emma's face had shown visible fear, her body tensing, her breathing becoming shallow, but she'd nodded slowly. "Max will be with me," she'd asked, her voice barely audible. "Yes, sweetheart, Max will be right there beside you," had promised. Doctor began preparing Emma for the courtroom experience through specialized therapy sessions. They role-played, with Doctor asking the types of questions lawyers typically pose. They practiced calming techniques Emma could use if anxiety surged. They discussed what would happen step by step, removing the unknown variables that fueled Emma's terror. "The judge is like a referee," Doctor explained. "He's not trying to hurt you. He's trying to understand your situation so he can make a fair decision. Your job is just to answer honestly." "What if I can't?" Emma whispered. "Then Max will help you remember that you're safe, just like he does here." Emma nodded, her hand finding Max's fur for comfort. The formal petition to allow Max in the courtroom was filed 10 days before the hearing. Emma's father's attorney responded immediately with a written objection. "Allowing an animal in the courtroom sets a dangerous precedent," the objection argued. "The presence of the dog could prejudice the court. Furthermore, it could be construed as an attempt to emotionally manipulate judicial proceedings in the mother's favor." Emma's mother's attorney countered with her own brief, arguing that Emma's medical condition necessitated accommodation and that excluding Max would violate disability discrimination principles. The judge, Hun Richardson, a woman in her 60s with a reputation for fairness, scheduled a pre-hearing conference to address the issue. Doctor, Emma's mother and her attorney, Emma's father and his attorney, and from Pause for Healing all gathered in the judge's chambers. Judge Richardson reviewed the documentation carefully. "I've never had such a request," she said thoughtfully. "However, I've also never seen such comprehensive medical evidence. Doctor, can you explain how this animal would function during testimony?" Doctor presented her case with clinical precision. She explained selective mutism, the physiology of anxiety, and how animals could activate calming responses. She described Max's training and certifications. She provided research studies demonstrating animal-assisted therapy's efficacy. "The dog wouldn't be testifying," Emma's father's attorney interrupted. "He wouldn't affect the credibility of Emma's statements." "Quite the opposite," Doctor responded calmly. "Max's presence actually increases the likelihood that Emma will be able to speak genuinely. Without him, I anticipate she'll experience a complete anxiety shutdown, freezing, inability to respond, selective mutism intensifying. The dog removes a barrier to communication, not adds one." Added her perspective. "Max is specifically trained for this type of support. He won't distract. He won't perform tricks or demand attention. His job is simply to provide a calming presence that allows Emma to access her own voice. Judge Richardson studied Emma's complete medical file, 18 months of documentation showing a child literally unable to speak due to anxiety. She reviewed the therapy notes chronicling the breakthrough moments with Max. "I'm going to allow it," she announced, "but with conditions. The dog remains beneath the witness stand during testimony. The dog's handler remains present. If the dog becomes disruptive in any way, we remove him immediately. Ms. will testify with the dog present, and if her testimony becomes incoherent or unreliable, we address that at the time. The jury," she paused, "the court will weigh the evidence accordingly." Emma's father's attorney looked furious but said nothing. Even he understood that challenging the judge's decision would appear unsympathetic to a traumatized child. The night before the hearing, Emma barely slept. Found her at 3 a.m., sitting in the kitchen, staring at nothing. They sat together in silence for an hour, hands clasped across the table. "I'm scared, Grandma," Emma finally whispered. "I know, it's okay to be scared. What if I can't talk? What if I forget everything? Then Max will be there, and I'll be there, and your therapist will be there. You're not alone, Emma. You're never alone." Morning arrived too quickly. Helped Emma dress in her favorite outfit, black leggings and a soft pink sweater. They arrived at the courthouse early, and Max was already there with calm and centered as always. Emma knelt beside him, her small arms wrapped around his neck. "Help me, Max," she whispered. "Please help me today." Max's tail wagged gently, his brown eyes seeming to contain ancient wisdom. He knew something of what was coming, understood that his role today mattered profoundly. He rested his chin on Emma's shoulder, a gesture of solidarity and strength. Watched her granddaughter and the golden retriever, and she understood that something miraculous was about to unfold. Emma had found her voice in Max's presence during therapy sessions. Today, in that intimidating courtroom, surrounded by lawyers and judges and the weight of her future, Max would help her find it again. The courtroom doors loomed ahead. Somewhere inside, two parents waited, each believing their version of custody was best, but none of them understood what was truly about to happen. When Emma walked through those doors with Max at her side, she wouldn't just be testifying. She would be reclaiming herself. The courthouse doors were heavier than Emma expected. As pushed them open, a blast of cold air hit her small face, and she instinctively moved closer to Max. The hallway stretched endlessly, marble floors reflecting fluorescent lights, high ceilings that made everything feel impossibly vast. Held her granddaughter's free hand while maintained hold of Max's leash, the golden retriever moving with practiced calm through the intimidating space. They approached the courtroom, room 4B, where Judge Richardson presided. Through the small window in the heavy wooden door, Emma could see the interior. Dark wood paneling, the judge's elevated bench positioned like a throne, lawyers' tables arranged on either side, rows of empty seats for observers. It looked like a cathedral designed for judgment rather than justice. A bailiff, a stern-faced man with a badge, opened the door. "We're ready for Ms.," he announced. Emma's legs felt disconnected from her body as she entered. The courtroom seemed to tilt and sway. Though rationally she understood it was perfectly stable, her anxiety simply distorting perception. She saw her father sitting at one table, his expression neutral but his hands gripping the edge tightly. Her mother sat at the opposite table, her eyes red from crying. Lawyers flanked both parents. A court reporter sat at a small desk, fingers poised over her machine, ready to capture every word. Judge Richardson looked down from her elevated position. "Good morning, Emma. I'm Judge Richardson. I know this is a little intimidating, but I just need you to answer some questions honestly about your family. Max can sit right here beside the witness stand, and your grandmother will be in the first row behind you. Okay?" Emma nodded, unable to produce sound. Her mouth had gone completely dry, her tongue feeling swollen and heavy. The bailiff guided her to the witness stand, a small wooden box that elevated her several feet above the courtroom floor. She felt exposed, displayed like an exhibit in a museum. Max positioned himself directly beneath her, his body pressed against the wooden structure. His presence was the only thing preventing complete panic. Emma placed her hand on a Bible. "Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?" "I do," Emma whispered, her voice emerging thin and reedy. The judge's attorney began with gentle questions, establishing baseline information. "What's your full name?" "Emma Maria." "How old are you?" 8. "Tell me about where you live currently." Emma explained the temporary custody arrangement, alternating weeks between her parents' homes. With each answer, her confidence grew slightly. The initial questions weren't threatening. They were simply facts. She could handle facts. Then the judge's attorney asked, "How do you feel about the arrangement of staying with each parent?" Emma hesitated. This was the first subjective question, the first moment where her answer mattered emotionally rather than factually. I like seeing both of them, but moving back and forth is hard." "Why is it hard?" Emma's eyes welled with tears. "Because I miss the parent I'm not with, and both houses feel different now. They're not happy places anymore." The judge leaned forward slightly, her expression compassionate. "You're doing very well, Emma. Just keep answering honestly." The judge's attorney continued for another 10 minutes, establishing that Emma loved both parents, that neither had explicitly coached her, that she understood the hearing's purpose. Emma managed to answer, though her voice remained small and her anxiety gradually escalated. She gripped Mr. Hopper's, her stuffed rabbit that she'd been allowed to bring, with white-knuckled intensity. Then Emma's father's attorney stood. His name was Mr. Harrison, and he was known for aggressive tactics. He was tall, probably 6'3", and he approached the witness stand with deliberate authority, his shoes clicking loudly against the courtroom floor with each step. "Hello, Emma," he said, his voice lacking any of the warmth the previous attorney had offered. "I'm Mr. Harrison. I represent your father. I'm going to ask you some questions, and I need you to answer them very carefully. Do you understand?" Emma nodded, her hands beginning to tremble. "Did your mother tell you what to say today?" "No," Emma replied, her voice barely audible. "Are you sure? Because it seems convenient that you're only able to speak in therapy, not with your father, but suddenly you can talk in court. Your mother has been taking you to therapy, hasn't she?" "Yes, but—" "Yes or no, Emma. Simple answers. Your mother pays for your therapy." "Grandma pays." "Your grandmother is your mother's mother, correct?" "Yes." "So your grandmother is biased toward your mother." Emma felt panic beginning to rise in her chest. The attorney's questions were building a narrative that her testimony was manufactured, coached, unreliable. "That's not. I don't know what you mean." "It's very simple, Emma. Your grandmother supports your mother. Your mother wants custody of you. Your grandmother helps your mother, so your grandmother pays for your therapy to make you feel better about your mother. Correct?" "That's not fair," Emma managed, tears now streaming down her face. "Grandma helps me because she loves me." "But she's still biased, isn't she? She wants you to say good things about your mother." The courtroom had gone completely silent. Emma's mother looked devastated, was on her feet, but a bailiff gestured for her to sit. Judge Richardson was watching the proceedings with obvious concern. Emma's breathing accelerated. Her chest felt impossibly tight, her lungs unable to process oxygen properly. Words evaporated. Her throat closed completely. "Now, you say you have anxiety," Mr. Harrison continued, his voice cutting like a knife. "But how do we know you're telling the truth about anything? How do we know you're not just repeating things your mother and grandmother coached you to say?" The room began spinning. Emma's vision blurred. This wasn't therapy. This wasn't safe. This was an adult actively attempting to invalidate her experience and her truth. Her body interpreted it as danger, and her nervous system responded by shutting down communication entirely. I can't," Emma gasped, unable to complete sentences. Tears poured down her face. Her body trembled violently. She was hyperventilating. "Your Honor," the judge's attorney objected, standing. "This is inappropriate questioning of a minor in trauma." "I'm simply testing the credibility of her testimony," Mr. Harrison countered. "Your Honor, if the child cannot withstand basic questioning, how can we trust anything she said?" Judge Richardson looked deeply troubled. Mr. Harrison stepped back. "Emma, are you all right?" Emma couldn't respond. Her throat had completely closed. This was selective mutism in its most severe form, her body completely by anxiety, communication impossible. She clutched Mr. Hoppers desperately, tears flowing, gasping for breath but unable to make sound. Max suddenly rose, pressing his body fully against Emma's legs beneath the witness stand. He whined softly, just once, a sound filled with emotional resonance. Emma looked down at him, her panicked eyes meeting his calm, steady gaze. "Your Honor," spoke from the gallery, standing with permission. "Emma is having an acute anxiety episode. This is precisely why Max is present. I need to work with her for a moment." Judge Richardson nodded. "Allow it. Mr. Harrison, sit down. We're going to take a brief recess." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Emma's mother sobbed quietly. Her father looked conflicted. His attorney's aggressive tactics had produced visible results, but the human cost was evident. Emma was suffering. Emma remained frozen in the witness stand, unable to move, unable to breathe properly, completely overwhelmed. Max pressed harder against her legs, his warmth and presence the only thing anchoring her to reality. The courtroom had become a battlefield, and she was the collateral damage of adult conflict. Judge Richardson looked down at the traumatized child, clearly reconsidering how to proceed. Something had to change. The system had failed this little girl, pushing her past her psychological limits in the name of fair testimony. The question now was whether anyone in that courtroom possessed the wisdom and compassion to recognize that something more was needed, something beyond legal procedure and aggressive cross-examination, something that acknowledged Emma's fundamental humanity. The recess room was a small, quiet space adjacent to the main courtroom, a sanctuary designed for children to decompress during legal proceedings. Emma sat in a soft chair, Max's head resting on her lap, her entire body still trembling from the anxiety episode. Sat beside her, her presence calm and grounding. Doctor, who had been observing from the gallery, entered the room carrying a paper cup of water. "You're okay, Emma," said softly, her hand resting gently on the girl's shoulder. "Your body got very scared back there. That's completely normal. You did nothing wrong." Emma couldn't speak. She was still caught in the aftermath of panic, her breathing shallow and rapid, her muscles locked in defensive tension. She'd experienced anxiety before, but never in such a public, hostile environment. The lawyer's aggressive questioning had felt like an attack, and her body had interpreted it as genuine danger. Doctor knelt in front of Emma, making eye contact. "Emma, I need you to focus on me for a moment. Can you do that?" Emma's eyes fixed on her therapist's calm face. "I'm going to guide you through something called box breathing. It's going to help your body realize it's safe. We breathe in for 4 counts, hold for 4, breathe out for 4, hold for 4. Ready?" Doctor demonstrated and Emma attempted to follow. The first cycle was clumsy, her breath catching and stuttering. But by the third cycle, something shifted. Her nervous system began recognizing the pattern, the familiar, controlled rhythm activating her parasympathetic nervous system, the part of her brain that promoted relaxation rather than fear. Max remained completely still throughout, his presence a silent reassurance that safety was possible. "That lawyer was trying to make you doubt yourself," said quietly after several minutes of breathing. "He was doing what lawyers do, testing credibility through pressure. But that doesn't make what you said untrue, Emma. You told the truth in there. Your heart knows the truth. He said Grandma is biased, Emma whispered, her voice hoarse from crying and panic. He made it sound like I'm lying. Are you lying? Doctor asked. No, Emma said firmly. I love both my parents and I do have anxiety, and Max does help me. Then you're not lying, Doctor affirmed. Mr. Harrison is trying to use pressure and fear to make you doubt yourself, but your truth doesn't change because someone challenges it. Appeared in the doorway, having been allowed to enter during the recess. She moved immediately to Emma and knelt beside the chair, wrapping her granddaughter in a fierce embrace. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry you had to endure that. What if I can't do this? Emma whispered against her grandmother's shoulder. What if I freeze again? Then we figure out another way, said, her voice fierce with determination. We don't let them bully you into silence. A court officer appeared. We're reconvening in 5 minutes. Emma felt her anxiety spike again. The thought of returning to that courtroom, of facing that aggressive lawyer again, seemed impossible. She looked at Max, and he lifted his head, making direct eye contact with her. Emma, I want to teach you something, said. She spent the next 3 minutes reviewing the signal they'd practiced dozens of times in therapy, a small gesture Emma could make with her right hand when she needed grounding. It was subtle, something only Max would fully recognize. Had trained Max to respond to this specific signal by placing his front paws on Emma's lap, creating physical contact that would ground her nervous system. When you feel the fear coming back, or when Mr. Harrison asks a question that makes you want to shut down, you can make this signal to Max, explained. Max will come closer, will remind your body that you're safe. It won't make the fear disappear completely, but it will help you stay present. It will help you remember that you're not alone. Emma practiced the signal 5 times. Each time, Max responded with perfect precision, placing his front paws gently on her lap, his brown eyes filled with that infinite patience and understanding. With each practice, Emma felt something subtle shift. She wasn't powerless in this situation. She had a tool. She had Max. The bailiff appeared again. The judge is ready. Emma took a deep breath, box breathing in through the nose for 4 counts, hold out through the mouth, squeezed her hand, adjusted Max's leash. Doctor gave her an encouraging nod. You're brave, Emma, Doctor said. Braver than most adults I know. Emma and Max re-entered the courtroom together. The silence was palpable. Everyone sensed they were about to witness something significant. Emma climbed back into the witness stand, Max resuming his position directly beneath her. Judge Richardson watched with obvious sympathy. Emma, are you ready to continue? The judge asked gently. Emma nodded. Mr. Harrison stood again, but something had shifted in his demeanor. He'd witnessed Emma's complete breakdown, and even he seemed to recognize that continuing aggressive tactics would cross an ethical line. Let me ask you a different question. Do you remember good times with your father before your parents' problems started? It was an olive branch, a less threatening question that gave Emma a chance to recover. Yes, she said quietly. He taught me to ride my bike. We went camping. He made pancakes on Sundays. Do you want to spend time with your father? Yes, I love my daddy. And your mother? I love her too. So this situation, your parents not being together, is hard for you. Very hard, Emma whispered, tears beginning to flow again. It's the hardest thing that's ever happened to me. Mr. Harrison paused, seeming to wrestle with something internal. Then he asked, what would make this easier, Emma? What do you need? Emma's throat tightened. This was the real question, not designed to trap or undermine, but genuinely asking what she needed. She felt panic beginning to rise again as she contemplated the weight of her answer, the way her words could determine her future. That's when she did it. Emma's right hand moved in the subtle gesture had taught her, the signal. Max responded instantly. He rose with fluid grace and placed his front paws directly on Emma's lap, But this time, instead of simply resting there, Max rested his entire head against Emma's chest, his body creating a bridge between her and the rest of the world. The dog's heartbeat synchronized with hers. His warmth radiated through her layers of clothing. His breath, steady and calm, seemed to carry a message. You are safe. You are not alone. You can do this. The entire courtroom froze. Even the court reporter's fingers paused over her machine. Judge Richardson leaned forward. Emma's mother gasped. Her father's eyes widened with something that looked like realization. The bailiff, the lawyers, the observers in the gallery, everyone recognized that they were witnessing something beyond ordinary legal procedure. It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't coaching. It was a traumatized child receiving comfort from the one being in the courtroom who asked nothing of her except to be present. Your Honor, Judge Richardson's bailiff whispered, should I? No, the judge said quietly. Let her have this moment. Emma's breathing gradually stabilized. The panic receded. With Max's head resting against her heart and her hand buried in his golden fur, something miraculous happened. She found her voice again. I need them to stop fighting, Emma said, speaking clearly despite her tears. I need them to love each other enough to be nice to each other, even if they don't love each other anymore. And I need to know that I'm not the reason they broke up. Her words hung in the courtroom like a revelation. This was the truth beneath all the legal maneuvering, beneath the custody battles and aggressive questioning. A child simply needed her parents to stop using her as a weapon in their war. Max remained perfectly still, his presence transforming the witness, stand from a place of interrogation into a sacred space of honest testimony. Judge Richardson's eyes glistened with unshed tears. The silence that followed Emma's statement was the kind of silence that felt alive with possibility, a moment suspended between the old world and something entirely new. Max remained motionless against Emma's chest, his presence a living anchor to truth and authenticity. Emma's hand stayed buried in his golden fur, drawing strength from their connection. Judge Richardson waited several seconds before speaking, her voice gentle but emotionally resonant. That took tremendous courage, Emma. Thank you for sharing that with us. Can you tell me more about why you think the fighting between your parents is happening? Emma took a shaky breath, Max's steady heartbeat providing rhythm to her own. With each exhale, her confidence grew incrementally. Daddy says Mommy doesn't listen to him. Mommy says Daddy is mean, but… Emma paused, choosing her words carefully. I think they're both hurt. I think they got so mad at each other that they forgot to remember the nice things. They forgot why they liked each other in the first place. Mr. Harrison stood to cross-examine, but before he could speak, Judge Richardson raised her hand. Mr. Harrison, I think we have sufficient testimony. The child has spoken to her emotional state and her needs with remarkable clarity. Emma's mother covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Something about hearing her daughter articulate the family's dysfunction with such brutal honesty had penetrated the protective walls she'd built. This wasn't about winning custody anymore. This was about understanding the damage being inflicted on the person she loved most. Emma's father stared at his daughter, really looked at her for the first time in months, and seemed to see her clearly. Not as a pawn in his dispute with her mother, not as a possession to be claimed, but as a human being experiencing genuine suffering. His own eyes welled with tears. Would you like to continue your testimony? Judge Richardson asked Emma gently. Emma nodded. With Max's presence grounding her, she felt an unfamiliar sense of power, not the aggressive power of anger or defensiveness, but the quiet power of authenticity. When Daddy picks me up, he asks me questions about Mommy, Emma continued, her voice growing steadier. Like, is Mommy dadding anyone? And does Mommy talk about me? At first, I thought he wanted to know because he cared, but I realized he was trying to make me tell on her. And when I'm at Mommy's house, she does the same thing about Daddy. Emma's father flinched visibly, recognizing the truth in his daughter's observation. I don't want to be a spy, Emma said, and the simple statement carried the weight of profound sadness. "I just want to be a kid. I want to go to school and do homework and play with my friends and not worry about making my parents sad." Doctor, watching from the gallery, felt tears flowing freely. This was genuine therapeutic breakthrough, not achieved through clinical interventions, but through the creation of a safe space where a traumatized child could access her own voice. "Do you love both of your parents?" Judge Richardson asked. "Yes," Emma said immediately. "I love them so much it hurts, but I also hate what they're doing to each other, and to me." The lawyer representing Emma's mother stood. "Emma, have you had the opportunity to tell your parents how you feel?" "No," Emma said quietly, "because every time I try to say something sad, they get defensive. Daddy says I'm taking Mommy's side. Mommy says I don't understand Daddy. They don't want to hear the truth. They want me to pick a side." Emma's father stood abruptly, his chair scraping loudly against the courtroom floor. His attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm, but he seemed not to notice. He was staring at his daughter with an expression of dawning realization and profound remorse. The anger that had fueled months of litigation seemed to drain from his body, replaced by something and more human, the recognition of how completely he'd failed to protect his child. Emma's mother reached toward her ex-husband across the courtroom, and for a moment their eyes met, really met, for the first time since the divorce proceedings began. Decades of shared history, of love and partnership and dreams built together, passed silently between them in that glance. And with it came the understanding that their conflict had been destroying the most important thing they'd ever created together. "I have one more thing to say," Emma announced, her voice growing stronger. Max shifted his weight slightly, his body language conveying support rather than movement. "I don't want my parents to get back together. I know they don't love each other like that anymore, but I need them to love me enough to stop hurting each other, because when they hurt each other, I hurt." Judge Richardson looked profoundly moved. "Thank you for your honesty, Emma. I think we have everything we need." Emma stepped down from the witness stand, Max immediately pressing against her leg. As she walked back toward the gallery, something unexpected happened. Her father rose and approached Emma directly, not dramatically, but with humble recognition of his transgression. "I'm sorry, Emma," he said, his voice breaking. "I'm so sorry, you're right. I've been asking you questions I shouldn't ask. I've been making this about me, not about you." Emma looked up at her father, this man who'd been transformed from her daddy into a stranger by anger and hurt, and saw genuine remorse. She wrapped her arms around him, and for the first time in months, they embraced with authentic connection rather than guilty obligation. Her mother joined them, and the three of them stood together in the center of the courtroom, a family broken but potentially repairable. "Your Honor," Emma's father's attorney said quietly, "I need to speak with my client. Could we have a brief recess?" Judge Richardson nodded. 15 minutes. As Emma, her parents, and their attorneys moved toward the consultation room, Doctor approached. "Did you see what just happened? That was authentic emotional breakthrough. Emma didn't just testify, she fundamentally shifted the entire dynamic in this room through her vulnerability and truth." She had Max said, watching her granddaughter walk between her parents. "That's what changed everything. She found her voice because she knew she wasn't alone." Joined them, Max's leash in her hand. "This is why we do this work. This is why animal-assisted therapy matters." Max didn't argue. He didn't present evidence. He simply offered presence, and that presence gave Emma access to her own power. In the consultation room, Emma sat between her parents while their attorneys conferred in the corner. Her father held her hand. Her mother had her arm around Emma's shoulders. "I want to ask you something," her father said quietly. "And I want you to answer honestly, not because you think it's what I want to hear, but because it's what you really feel. Do you still love me?" "Yes," Emma said without hesitation. "I love you, but I hate what you've been doing. I hate that you're fighting with Mommy. I hate that you ask me questions about her. I hate that you make me feel like I'm the problem." "You're not the problem," her father said. "You're perfect. And I've been cruel to you because I was hurt about your mom. That's not your responsibility. That's my responsibility. And I'm going to do better." Emma's mother squeezed her shoulder. "We both are. I'm sorry too, baby. I'm sorry we put you in the middle." Emma's attorney emerged from the corner consultation area. "Your clients want to speak with you, both of you together." The two parents looked at each other. Uncertainty, shame, and something that might have been the beginning of respect passing between them. They'd been enemies for so long, they'd almost forgotten how to be humans capable of change. "What are you thinking?" Emma's mother asked her father quietly. "I'm thinking our daughter was right," he said. "I'm thinking we've been so focused on winning that we forgot what we're actually trying to protect. She's not a prize to be won. She's a child who needs her parents to be civil, cooperative, and, most importantly, focused on her instead of our ego." Emma's mother nodded slowly. "I agree. I don't want to fight anymore. I don't want Emma to feel like she's the reason we're broken." "So what do we do?" her father asked. "We figure out an arrangement that works for all of us," her mother said. "Together." Emma watched her parents negotiate with each other, not antagonistically, but collaboratively, and felt something miraculous happen inside her chest. Hope. Real, tangible hope that healing was actually possible. Max, still by her side, rested his head on her lap, his tail wagging gently. He'd helped her find her voice, and her voice had begun to heal her family. When the consultation room door opened 40 minutes later, the entire courtroom seemed to hold its breath. Judge Richardson had reconvened everyone while Emma sat in the gallery with and Max, not knowing what to expect. The legal system had taught her that outcomes were determined by lawyers and judges, that her voice, no matter how authentic, ultimately held limited power. But what happened next proved that assumption profoundly wrong. Emma's father and mother walked to the front of the courtroom together, not flanking their respective attorneys, but side by side, presenting a unified front for the first time since the divorce proceedings began. Their attorneys exchanged confused glances, unsure what their clients had agreed to during the private consultation. Judge Richardson looked up from her bench, sensing something significant was about to occur. "Do we have a development?" Emma's father stepped forward. His voice was steady but emotional, carrying the weight of months of introspection compressed into a single moment. "Your Honor, my ex-wife and I have reached an agreement. We've decided to withdraw our previous custody proposals and submit a modified arrangement that we've developed jointly." The courtroom erupted in whispers. Joint agreement in custody cases was rare enough to draw attention from the court observers who'd been half asleep in the gallery. This was news, genuine news in the legal world. "Go ahead," Judge Richardson said, her expression curious and cautiously hopeful. Emma's mother spoke next, her voice trembling slightly. "We've recognized that our conflict has been deeply harmful to our daughter. Today, hearing Emma testify, hearing her pain articulated so clearly, we understood that we needed to fundamentally change our approach. This isn't about winning custody or proving who's the better parent. This is about protecting our child." Emma felt tears begin to flow again, but different tears than before. These were tears of relief, of witnessing her parents finally seeing each other and her with clarity. "Our new proposal," her father continued, "involves 50-50 custody with genuine flexibility. Emma will spend 1 week with me, 1 week with her mother. No contentious transitions. We're committing to co-parenting counseling to learn healthy communication patterns. And most importantly," he paused, making direct eye contact with his ex-wife, "we're committing to never, under any circumstances, ask Emma questions about the other parent or use her as a messenger between us." Emma's mother nodded vigorously. "We recognize that our daughter has been caught in the crossfire of adult conflict. That ends today. We're putting her needs, not our egos, at the absolute center of every decision we make." Judge Richardson leaned back in her chair, visibly moved. This is remarkable. In 30 years on the bench, I've witnessed countless custody battles, but rarely do I see parents reach this level of insight and commitment to their child's. What changed? Emma's father looked directly at his daughter. Our daughter changed us, Your Honor. She spoke truth with a clarity that cut through all the legal maneuvering and blame. She made us recognize that we were destroying the most important thing in both our lives, our relationship with her. And the animal, Emma's mother added, her eyes finding Max in the gallery. I need to acknowledge that the presence of this service dog was instrumental. Emma found her voice because she felt safe, because she knew she wasn't alone. That's something our legal system sometimes forgets, the importance of feeling safe enough to speak truth. Judge Richardson nodded slowly. Mr. and Mrs., she corrected herself, your respective surnames. I'm going to ask you directly. Do both of you genuinely agree to this arrangement? Not because your attorneys advised it, not because you think it will impress me, but because you authentically believe it serves your daughter's best interests. Emma's father didn't hesitate. Yes, Your Honor, absolutely. Yes, Emma's mother affirmed. This is what Emma needs. This is what we should have agreed to months ago. Judge Richardson studied them both carefully, evaluating their sincerity. After a long moment, she nodded. I'm going to approve this arrangement, but I want to add one additional requirement. Both parents will attend quarterly check-in sessions with a family therapist for the next 2 years. These sessions will evaluate how the arrangement is working and allow for modifications if needed. Additionally, I'm recommending that you both continue individual therapy to address the underlying issues that contributed to this conflict. We agree, both parents said simultaneously, then exchanged a look that suggested they were still learning to navigate their new cooperative dynamic. Furthermore, Judge Richardson continued, her gaze sweeping across the courtroom, I want to commend this child for her bravery today. Emma demonstrated more emotional maturity and clarity than most adults bring to difficult situations. Her willingness to speak her truth, difficult as it was, has resulted in a custody arrangement focused entirely on her. That's how the system should work. The courtroom burst into spontaneous applause, something highly unusual in legal proceedings. Court officers didn't stop it, seeming to recognize that this moment transcended formal protocol. Emma's teachers, who'd attended the hearing to provide support, clapped vigorously. Stood and clapped, tears streaming down her face. Doctor clapped. Even some of the observers, strangers who'd come to watch custody proceedings out of curiosity, clapped. Max, sensing the positive energy shift, wagged his tail enthusiastically, his body language conveying understanding that something important had been accomplished. But the true shock came next. Emma's father approached the bench. Your Honor, if I may address the court one final time. Judge Richardson nodded. I want to say something to my ex-wife, he said, then turned to face her directly. They stood approximately 10 feet apart in the courtroom with all eyes upon them. I'm sorry for the anger. I'm sorry for using our daughter as a weapon in our conflict. I'm sorry for the pain I've caused her, and I'm sorry for the pain I've caused you. The entire courtroom seemed to collectively hold its breath. Emma's mother's face crumpled with emotion. She walked forward until she stood directly facing her ex-husband. I'm sorry too. I was so hurt and angry that I couldn't see what I was doing to Emma. I couldn't see what I was doing to you, even though you hurt me deeply. But today, I saw our daughter speaking her truth, and I realized that's all I ever wanted from you, genuine honesty and partnership. Can we have that? Her father asked quietly. Can we be partners again, not as spouses but as parents? Yes, her mother said. Yes, I think we can. And then, in a moment that shocked absolutely everyone in the courtroom, including themselves, Emma's parents embraced. Not a brief, formal hug, but a genuine embrace filled with recognition of shared pain and commitment to healing. Her father rested his chin on her mother's shoulder. Her mother placed her hand on his back. They stood together for nearly a minute, two people who'd been locked in conflict finally acknowledging their shared humanity. Judge Richardson actually wiped away a tear from her cheek. When Emma's parents released each other and turned back to the gallery, their eyes found their daughter simultaneously. Emma stood, Max pressing against her leg, and made eye contact with both of them. Her father extended his hand toward her. Her mother opened her arms. Emma moved toward them, walking down the gallery aisle with Max at her side. The three of them came together in the center of the courtroom, a family broken but beginning to heal. Emma's father knelt to her eye level. "I'm going to do better, Emma. I promise. No more questions about your mom. No more asking you to pick sides. I'm just going to love you and be the best father I can be." "We both will," her mother added, running her hand over Emma's hair. "We're going to be a better family, a different family, but a better one." Emma looked between her parents, then down at Max, who'd positioned himself at the center of their circle. "Can Max come to both houses?" Her parents exchanged a look and nodded in unison. "Of course," her father said. "Max is family now too." The courtroom observers stood spontaneously, another wave of applause, this time with barely contained emotion. People wiped their eyes. Someone whispered, "I've never seen anything like this in a courtroom before." Judge Richardson gavelled once, not as a command for silence, but as an acknowledgement of something sacred. "Let the record reflect that this custody proceeding has been resolved through voluntary agreement of both parents, with the child's as the primary consideration. Court is adjourned." But nobody moved immediately. The moment felt too significant to rush away from. Emma's parents stood on either side of her, each with a hand on her shoulder. Max's tail wagged steadily, and in that frozen instant, everyone in the courtroom seemed to recognize something profound. Sometimes the most powerful force for change in the legal system isn't procedure or evidence or aggressive advocacy. Sometimes it's simply a traumatized child finding her voice, accompanied by a dog who understood that presence was more powerful than words. The reporters waiting outside would later describe it as the most unusual and moving custody resolution they'd ever witnessed. The story would eventually make its way to local news outlets, though the family itself would request anonymity to protect Emma's privacy. Social workers and therapists would reference this case when discussing animal-assisted therapy in legal proceedings. But inside the courtroom, in that final moment before people began gathering their materials and files, the significance was simple and profound. A family had chosen healing over destruction, collaboration over conflict, and authentic love over legal victory. And it had all begun when a small girl found her voice. 3 months had passed since the courtroom breakthrough, and Emma looked like a different child entirely. She sat at her desk in Mrs. Classroom, hand raised confidently, volunteering to read a passage aloud during reading comprehension time. Her voice, once stolen by selective mutism, now flowed naturally through sentences. She stumbled occasionally over difficult words, but she didn't freeze or shut down. She simply paused, sounded out the syllables, and continued. The classroom listened attentively, but what struck Mrs. most profoundly was the visible ease in Emma's body. No tension, no anxiety, no signs of the traumatized child who'd sat silently in these same seats just months ago. During lunch, Emma sat with and 2 other girls, laughing as they discussed weekend plans, had cautiously renewed their friendship after noticing the dramatic shift in Emma's demeanor. "You're like the old Emma," had said during their first lunch together after the hearing, "but also different, better somehow." Emma had smiled. "I'm just me now, I'm not pretending anymore." After school, Emma's father picked her up. It was his week in the custody rotation. The transition between parents that had once caused her profound anxiety now felt natural and secure. Her father no longer asked invasive questions about her mother or attempted to extract information. Instead, he asked about her day, her feelings, her interests. He listened, genuinely listened. "How was your day?" he asked as she climbed into the car, Max already waiting in the back seat with his tail wagging. "Good," Emma said, climbing into the passenger seat and immediately reaching back to scratch Max's ears. "Mrs. said I'm reading at a really high level now. She thinks I might be ready for the advanced reading group." "That's amazing, Emma. I'm so proud of you," her father said, and Emma could hear genuine pride in his voice, not the performative pride of a parent trying to win custody battles, but authentic recognition of his daughter's achievement. The transformation extended beyond Emma. Her father had committed to individual therapy, working through the anger and hurt that had fueled months of destructive conflict. He'd attended every co-parenting counseling session with Emma's mother, learning to communicate without blame or defensiveness. The changes were visible. His face carried less tension. His voice contained less edge. He was becoming the father Emma remembered from childhood, but with added wisdom and intentionality. Emma's mother experienced similar transformation. She'd thrown herself into her own therapy work, exploring the abandonment wounds that had made the divorce feel like a personal attack rather than a natural dissolution of a relationship. She developed genuine compassion for her ex-husband's perspective, even as they remained permanently separated. During their last co-parenting counseling session, she'd actually thanked him for his willingness to change. "I want to apologize," she'd told him in front of the therapist, "for blaming you entirely, for making this so adversarial, for using Emma as a weapon. You've worked so hard to be better, and I appreciate that." Her father had nodded, tears in his eyes. "I appreciate you saying that, and I want to apologize too for all of it." Emma had been present for part of that session, watching her parents genuinely respect each other for perhaps the first time since the divorce proceedings began. It was strange to see them cooperate, sometimes even smile together, but it was also deeply healing. Max remained at the center of Emma's emotional ecosystem. The service dog transitioned seamlessly between both households, his presence ensuring continuity and security regardless of which parent Emma was staying with. Both homes had created special spaces for him, comfortable dog beds, toys, and most importantly, dedicated time for connection. Max had become the physical manifestation of family stability, a living reminder that Emma could be loved by both parents simultaneously. Doctor had continued working with Emma monthly, though the sessions had transformed from intensive trauma processing to what she called consolidation work, helping Emma integrate the breakthrough and maintain her progress. During their last session, Emma had articulated something profound. "I used to think if I stopped being afraid, my parents would stop fighting," Emma had explained. "Like my anxiety was the problem, and if I could just fix myself, everything would be okay. But then I realized the fighting wasn't because of me. It was because of them, and I'm not responsible for fixing them." Doctor had smiled. "That's a very mature realization, Emma. Many adults never reach that understanding. You've learned something really important about boundaries and responsibility." Emma's teachers noticed the changes too. She participated in class discussions. She raised her hand. She made friends with other children who'd previously seemed intimidated by her withdrawn demeanor. Her test scores improved significantly, not because she suddenly became smarter, but because anxiety was no longer consuming the cognitive resources she needed for learning. Her principal had called her parents, both of them, to celebrate the dramatic improvement in her academic performance and social engagement. The most remarkable transformation occurred in Emma's sense of agency. For months, she'd felt like a pawn in her parents' conflict, powerless, voiceless, controlled by circumstances beyond her understanding. But her testimony in court had fundamentally altered that perception. She'd recognized that her voice mattered, that her truth could create change, that she possessed power, not to manipulate or control, but to authentically communicate her needs and have them respected. "I'm not scared of my feelings anymore," Emma told during a weekend visit to her grandmother's house. Max lay at her feet while they sat on the porch swing, gently rocking. "When I feel sad, I can just be sad. I don't have to pretend everything is okay." "That's called authenticity," said, squeezing her granddaughter's hand. "That's what your Max helped you discover, and that's a gift that will serve you for the rest of your life." Had been profoundly affected by Emma's healing journey as well. She'd attended several family therapy sessions and had worked through her own guilt about not recognizing the depth of Emma's trauma earlier. She'd also developed genuine respect for both of Emma's parents, recognizing their willingness to prioritize their daughter over their own egos. 6 months after the hearing, the family gathered for Emma's birthday celebration, the first time in years that both parents attended the same event without tension or conflict. Emma's father brought his signature chocolate cake. Emma's mother brought decorations. They sat around the dining room table together, alongside and from Pause for Healing, celebrating this remarkable child's 9th birthday. Emma, wearing a crown made of flowers that had fashioned, looked around the table with visible contentment. Max rested his head on her lap, occasionally accepting pieces of salmon, her mother's special birthday recipe, from her hand. "I want to say something," Emma announced, her young voice carrying the gravity of someone who'd experienced genuine emotional transformation. "Thank you for being here. Thank you for trying to be better. And thank you to Max for helping me find my voice." Max's tail wagged, and he seemed to understand that this small human was acknowledging something profound about their connection. Emma's father reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "Thank you for having the courage to tell us the truth, Emma. You changed all of us." "You saved our family," her mother added, her eyes glistening with tears. "Not by fixing us or choosing sides, but by speaking what needed to be said." Emma understood something most adults never fully grasp, that sometimes the most powerful force for change isn't punishment or pressure or aggressive advocacy. Sometimes it's simply a traumatized child finding their voice in a safe space, accompanied by unconditional love and presence. The courtroom hearing had been the catalyst, but the real healing had occurred in the months that followed, in the therapy sessions, the awkward conversations, the deliberate choices both parents made daily to prioritize Emma's over their own pride. They'd built a new family structure, different from what existed before but somehow stronger because it was founded on genuine respect and authentic commitment rather than obligation or social expectation. Emma would carry the lessons of this experience throughout her life. She would remember what it felt like to lose her voice and what it took to find it again. She would understand that families could break and still be worth rebuilding. She would know that healing was possible, even when circumstances seemed hopeless. And she would never forget Max, the golden retriever who taught her that sometimes the most profound communication occurs without words, and that presence can be more powerful than any argument or legal strategy. As Emma's family celebrated her birthday, with Max moving between family members seeking affection and sharing in the joy, something fundamental had shifted in their world. They weren't a perfect family. They still had challenges and disagreements and moments of tension. But they were a family united by genuine love and authentic commitment to each other's. And that, Emma understood, was everything. The end.